At the outset, on behalf of WWF-India and Accenture, I would like to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity. And it's an advantage and a disadvantage being the last speaker in the panel. Advantage is that a lot of things have been covered, and so one can rush through many things. The disadvantage is that you have come prepared to speak certain things which is already talked by the earlier speakers. In any case, beautiful, isn't it? This is the source water of the Indus River system. It's a high altitude wetland but under risk. So what I'm trying to discuss with you today is a brief report that we have just brought in. It's fresh from the press, and this talks about the industry water risk, and it's a joint initiative of WWF and Accenture. It talks about how industries are perceiving risk, what their responses are, and how do we sort of move forward. Water is shared resource, common property resource, it's under risk, everyone talked about it, but I just want to bring the human element to it. Domestic, we still have about 100 million people who doesn't have access to safe drinking water, 800 odd million people without access to improved sanitation. But the things are going to change for bad and for worse. Urbanization, 50% of India will live in cities, 80% of domestic sewage from cities are going into rivers untreated. So that's the challenge that we are staring at. Agriculture, Bas detailed it out, so I'm not getting into that, but it's one of the sectors with the highest cumulative water footprint. Got to be taken care of. Industry, important because it's a one sector with the highest growth in water demand. When we looked at the statistics, different studies project different figures, but the range is anywhere between 150 to 280% growth in water demand between 2010 and 2050. So that's something serious, and that's the reason why we are here today, to look at options where we can engage with each other and find solutions. One important sector, being a part of a conservation organization, we are worried about ecology, and no one talks about it. The water policy of Government of India, which was adopted last December, is pretty disappointing. Lip service to ecology, but no priority allocation, nothing. But believe me, there is a lot of push to allocate water for ecological reserves, and if that comes in, the competition is going to change, and the dimensions are going to change. So let's be aware of that. The rivers are getting dry, but there is also a demand for ecological flows. Believe me, the Ganga Basin Authority is looking at it very seriously. They are looking at the trade-offs, and they are looking at where the water can come in and flow into the river. So that's going to be a serious policy shift we will see in the next 10 to 15 years. The second picture, you are seeing a dirty drain. It's not the drain, it's mighty Yamuna in the national capital of Delhi. It's polluted, despite spending millions and millions of rupees into the Yamuna cleanup program. Bas talked about the groundwater extraction, largest consumer of groundwater in the world. 40% of our food production depends on agriculture, but we destroy our recharge zones. We don't bother about replenishment of groundwater. We don't look at sustainable abstraction of groundwater. So that's an area which we need to look at, whereas people still struggle to find a drop of water during crisis times. WRG report predicts that 50%, the demand supply gap is going to be more than 50% by 2030, and 2030 is not far away. And in terms of water quality, we are really doing bad, and so the bad quality of water is also lesser quantity of water you have for your consumption. This is one study that DHA has done for WWF India, which looked at how the water stress levels are going to change in the next 40 years. And as you all might be knowing, 14 out of the 20 river basins are already water stressed. And as one of the earlier speakers said, there are geographical variations, there are local specificities. Some places are water rich, but some places are water scarce. One of the things which I want to flag before you is also that in planning, in siting of industries, in siting of cities, we don't look at hydrological or hydrogeological considerations. We don't really bother about that. Wherever we get land, wherever we get convenience, we just site the industries or cities, and that paradigm also need to change. as I said, this study is all about industries, and the reasons are obvious because the water demand growth is going to be the most in this, and it has a huge supply chain and impacts on local watershed as well as a basin or a sub-basin level. So that's the reason why we looked at it, and we looked at 6 sectors. We initially wanted to run the water risk filter that WWF International has developed, and my colleagues Stuart Orr and Joachim are here who have done this pioneering work. But what we realized as we got into the water risk filter is that there is absolutely no data. There is absolutely no data. Even water consumption data is as old as 2007, 2008, and no surveys are available and on a regular basis. And that's something very worrying, and we need to sort of look at that. Some of the sectors that we looked at, out of the 24 odd different sectors, we prioritized around 6 because of the following reasons. Thermal. 75% of India's capacity addition, energy capacity addition in the 12th 5-year plan is going to be coal-based thermal power plants, and coal-based plants are one of the water guzzling industries, and because it uses water for cooling. And water demand by different estimates is going to increase from anywhere between 4 to 30 times, and we don't know what is the reality. No one has come up with exact figures, so these are different reports of the Government of India. Pulp and paper, it consumes, a lot of things have changed, technology has improved, but even today, the paper and pulp industry in India consumes 5 times more water than the global best. So there is a lot of scope for us to reinvent. 85% of the water is sourced from surface water sources, so rivers are under threat, and 40% of the mills in India are accused of polluting groundwater. Textiles, important from a livelihood point of view. 35 million people are engaged in textiles. 17% of the foreign exchange comes through textile industry in India. But from the water point of view, cotton consumes almost 50% of the pesticides used in the country, and hence it pollutes the groundwater. It also exports 25 billion cubic meters. Shama talked about the virtual water footprint. One of the studies by UNESCO shows that 25 billion cubic kilometers of water is transported out of India through cotton textiles. So that's so we need to think of and discuss of how we can be more efficient. Steel, we heard from Tata Steel in the morning. A lot of things have changed, but overall, if you look at the sector, whereas global companies recycle about 95% of the water that they use in their processing, whereas Indian companies discharge about 85% of the water they use in their processing as effluents, and water demand is set to rise by 350%. So it's a huge increase that is going to happen because the steel production capacity is going to grow. Sugar, 50 million people, 9 states. And the important thing is when we talk to different companies, everyone realizes that 72% of water is available, inherent water which is available in the sugarcane can be used and harnessed back into the sugar mill operations, but very few people are doing it. So there is an opportunity for us to sort of look at that. Beverages, water usage ratio has come down, but it's still lower than the global best and increased brand value risk across its supply chain. Now let's also look at the risk to the basins. Now, when an industry opens up a factory, it looks at water availability for sure, but we are not sure from some of our conversations, whether the companies are really looking at the risk to the basin. When I talk about risk to the basin, we sort of categorize it amongst physical, reputational, and regulatory risk. Physical is attributed to the water quality and quantity of it, and it can have impacts on the society when the water quality deteriorates and the water quantity declines. So we try to sort of look at some of this. And regulatory risk is, Bas talked about it, it's a fractured water governance in this country, and there is absolute confusion about who owns water in this country, in this state. So that has led to a lot of inaction, and a lot of the things fall through the gap, and no one really takes ownership, and that has actually led to freshwater biodiversity loss and deterioration of ecosystem. Reputational risk, when a basin is impacted, when the government fail to ensure equity and delivery and access of water, there's a huge reputational risk that exists for that particular region. We will get into the business related risk a little later. Yeah, it's here. Physical risk, we looked at the disruption in operations, direct operations, as well as in the supply chain due to lack of water availability and poor quality. Look at number of examples. We have just used 3 examples here, recent examples. A brewery in Maharashtra was shut down in Jan 2013 because of prevailing drought conditions. Distilleries were closed down. Refinery in April 2012 in Karnataka was forced to shut down for 45 days because of water scarcity. Thermal power plants, again Maharashtra is a classic case. In 2012, the Chandrapur thermal power station had to be closed down because the water availability in Irai Dam was very low, and they wanted to reserve the water for the Chandrapur town, which is downstream. So the competition is going to grow, and right now you know some of the speakers talked about the drought in Maharashtra, and it's actually becoming worse. Now I want to take your attention to the 2 images. One is the upper reaches of the Ganga, one of the tributaries of the Ganga which is flowing dry. Because we really don't bother how much ecological flows are required in the rivers. Look at the downstream. It's from South India. It's a river called Noyal, and this is a place downstream of a dam called Ritupalayam Dam, which is about 100 kilometers from Tirupur. Tirupur is another very promising textile sectors, textile clusters of the country. So what are we doing to our nature? Who will speak for them? Gangetic dolphins, it exists in India, but it's endangered. The numbers are going down. Habitat fragmentation, we build dams, we build barrages, but we don't ensure connectivity, lateral and longitudinal. Where will they go? Otters, again endangered. Fish, this is an iconic Mahasir fish, it's a game fish. Population is going down, and we really don't know how many of them are existing today, because we don't have a uniform methodology. No water policy or water resources department bothers about these animals, but we need to also think about them. Regulatory risk, Romit did speak about some of the changes that is happening in the policy shifts that's happening in the Planning Commission and the Government of India level. They are talking about water disclosures and water auditing. The Water Use Efficiency Bureau is also coming in. But the Central Groundwater Board authority has come up with a notification which will have overriding impacts on about 6 sectors that we talked about in terms of where they are sited, how much water they are going to extract. So things are going to change. Pollution control boards and the pollution control boards as well as the high courts are also taking a serious note of this. Reputational risk, I am not going to get into the details. It's about conflicts and distress. Beverages, thermal, textiles, distilleries, all are really facing. And this is the work that we have done to map where these sectors stand in terms of their reputational risk and the regulatory risk. So if you look at the bubbles, the size of the bubble indicates the physical water risk that is perceived by the industry, and there's a correction, this is a risk as perceived by the industry. So if you look at it, beverages top the list. They are having a high reputational and a regulatory risk, and also a huge physical risk, whereas some of the guys in the thermal sector felt that the risk is not that serious. We will get into the details of that a little later. Thermal, the reason is that as a part of the EIA clearances, the environmental impact assessments clearances, there is a set water allocation promised by the local or the state government. So they are pretty much secured in terms of how much water is available. Same is the case with steel. And if you look at the regulatory and the reputational risk in these 2 sectors, it's very low. It's very low because most of the companies are moving towards high-end technologies, and they're very confident that whatever changes happen, we are going to sort of align ourselves with that. Reputational risk, I want to draw your attention to, it's very low, the reputational risk, because what was told to us is that none of the investors or buyers are interested in what happens in the backyard or in the supply chain, and that again is going to change in future. Sugar, farmers are finding sugarcane cultivation unsustainable, so they are going to alternate cropping. So the companies are really coming up with alternate strategies. So physical risk is medium. Paper, if you look at it, regulatory risk is high here because of the recent court cases and regulatory changes. Physical risk also, they have rated it as medium. Textiles, it's medium risk in physical as well as regulatory, but in beverages, if you look at it, it's high regulatory risk because it's feared that you'll find it difficult to find a place to site your industries. Now, what is the response? We've looked at some of the work that FICCI and CII has done and sort of mapped them into different categories. And what we are finding is that within the fence, we are pretty okay. Within the fence, we are doing really good. Looking at installing rooftop water harvesting, the wastewater recycling systems, advanced technologies, heat recovery, etc., etc. At a basin level, I'll go back to. Can I have a water? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'll go back to what Babu was saying. We reach out to 1,000 farmers, 10,000 farmers, maximum a lakh farmers, and how is it going to make a difference? Is that going to insulate us from long-term water risk? And that's the question I think it's important that we discuss and debate for the next 2 days and come up with an answer. So we sort of tried to map this in what we call as a water stewardship ladder. And we categorize it into beginner, progressive, and leader. Leader is a guy who is actually ensuring that the long-term water is addressed. Now, if you look at the first few steps, internal water risk auditing, we are pretty good. Measuring water footprint, we are doing that. Minimizing water use and process re-engineering, we are doing very good. When you come to basin level water risk mapping, are we understanding that other stakeholders exist? There are other sectors operating in my basin. There are cities in my basin. There is agriculture. Are we understanding that? Then the answer is no. We are not really understanding the importance of water as a shared resource, and therefore water policy also doesn't give us hope. But we need to sort of, as a group, push for better water policy and progressive one. For communities, it's about ecology and livelihoods, because most of our livelihoods are dependent on ecology, so we need to sort of look at that. But businesses, it's economic value. So we can actually convert a lot of our cost centers to profit centers if we sort of strategically plan and work with the other stakeholders. I mentioned briefly, I'll take one more minute and I'll wind up. I know that I've overshot the time. One of the things I mentioned was that investors are not asking the right questions when they look at the bankability of a project in India. Across the board, this has come out during our study, but they will ask for disclosures. And many global investors are looking at, and global supply chain is becoming vigilant. Global customers are becoming vigilant, and no more we can stay back and say that we are doing everything good in our fence or in our region. So in India also, the customers will become aware and they will ask questions: where my product is coming from, what impact it has had in its production state. The last message is, I'll leave you with a beautiful shot, a beauty shot as we call. We need collective action, and we need to secure water for nature, water for people, and for businesses. And thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I took 2 or 3 more minutes. Thank you very much. One more announcement. This report will be available in WWF-India website and Assenger website towards the end of the day. Thank you very much.